Hello, everyone. Thank you for everyone tuning in. I see Lisa's comment. Thank you for commenting, Lisa. I hope you enjoy the video later on. What I thought I would do for today's live stream is to first talk about some book news that's happened recently, and then also do a bit, Q&A, answer anything book related. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll try to get to all of them. I sometimes miss a few, but I'll try to get to all of them today. The first thing I wanted to talk about was that there was big news recently that Daw Books ended up going back and repurchasing the rights to the Sun Eater saga from Christopher Ruocchio. They had published the first 5, and then the 6th book was done at Baen, and then the Sun Eater saga is going back to Daw, and they bought the rights to the paperback edition of Disquiet Gods there. So that shows they really wanted the book back, and so it's interesting that they're going to go back and, in paperback at least, all of the copies of the Sun Eater will be back at Daw, so it'll be all the same formatting and stuff, which is pretty nice. So we have some more people joining us. Thank you all for joining. Again, if you have any questions, any book related comments you want to throw in the chat, I'll try to read them and discuss them as I can. So one of the other book news that was announced was we got the cover for Larry Correia's final Son of the Black Sword series, and that cover looks really good. We also got a new cover reveal for Robert Hampson's new book, which is in the Black Tide Rising universe, and they just announced that over at Tor on Tor.com, which is now called Reactor. On Reactor, they're going to be putting up one chapter a week of Stormlight for up until the release of Stormlight in December, which is really exciting. So if you're one of those people that likes to read the chapters as they come out for that series, you can read them online for free, and then you'll have read like a quarter of the book before the book even comes out, which is pretty nice. So what other book news do we have? Are there any questions in the live chat that we have so far? Anakin Skywalker says, which Star Wars books are you going to be reading this summer? Well, the summer's almost over, but I have read, I just, for the YouTube, for the podcast, the Star Wars podcast that I do, I reread the first 2 Darth Bane books. And then I also, I'm about to read The Crystal Star this month. And last month, I read Yoda Dark Rendezvous. And next month in August, I'm going to be reading the short story collection from Kevin J. Anderson, Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. And that is going to be both, I'll have a typical review video, but I'm also going to do my YouTube shorts talking about that book. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun, that book. Kevin J. Anderson, his books are usually entertaining, and it's, there's a bunch of other Star Wars authors that will be contributing to that, that are contributing to that collection. And that one has, I believe, 14 stories, or maybe it's 18 stories. It's way fewer stories than, say, the From a Certain Point of View series, which was like 40 short stories. So thank you for that question, Anakin. See, other people have joined us as well. If you are interested in any comments, book related or otherwise, you can put it in the chat, and we'll try to talk about them. Anakin Skywalker also says, I started reading The Living Force a few days ago. It's very good so far. Yes, it is a very entertaining book. One thing that John Jackson Miller does really well is not only does he write books that, like, if you're a Legends fan, they're entertaining, but if you're a canon fan, they're also entertaining. So he does a good job of balancing that. But also, it's that there's so much humor in that book. Yariel Poof is hilarious in that book, as is probably Ki-Adi-Mundi actually was pretty funny in that book, so I really, really enjoyed him as well. The book also has slight ties to the High Republic book series, but it's really small. It's really small. But I'm glad you're enjoying it, Anakin. I don't know how to pronounce your name. It's Itajism. It says, "What's your favorite Star Trek book you've read so far?" So my absolute favorite Star Trek books are the I'm going to say Takedown by John Jackson Miller and his Prey trilogy. His Prey trilogy is like my top Star Trek story of all time. Movies, television, books. Like for Star Trek, that's where it's at. However, if I'm not talking about him, because I talk about him a lot, I'm going to say instead talk about the Fall series, which is a 5-book series that does has like the TNG storyline and the Deep Space Nine storyline together, and it's kind of political, not political in sense like preaching stuff, but in sense of dealing with, a certain major politician is murdered, and so they have to replace that politician and figure stuff out. And it's a really, really interesting book series. You have David R. George, Una McCormick participated. She wrote my favorite book in the series. David Mack wrote a terrific book in the series. James Swallow wrote a terrific book, and Dayton Ward also wrote a pretty good one. So the Fall series is also really, really good. All right, we also have a comment from Fast Zach 84. Says, starting the Kenobi book, does it contradict anything canon wise? Hope it is good. Not really, because in the canon we got stuff from the Kenobi show, which is set like 10 years in the future. Whereas the Kenobi book is only like the first month that he's on Tatooine. So, and he doesn't leave, spoiler, he doesn't leave the planet at all in the book. So no, it does not contradict anything canon at the moment. And it actually, the way they did the show, there's little subtle things that make you think, were they thinking about the book? Because I know that both Ewan McGregor and Deborah Chow read the Kenobi novel. They didn't pull anything from it, but I know they read it, so it was probably somewhere in the back of their mind. All right, let's see. We have Hunter. By the way, thank you for that question, Zach. Fast Zach. We have Hunter Hodes says, finishing Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader. Super fun so far. I think I'll read Kenobi after, which I'm stoked for. I know some people who pair those books because you're like, you want to see Kenobi immediately after, and you want to see Vader immediately after Revenge of the Sith. And that's, to get the light side and the dark side. It's a good pairing. James Luceno did a very good job with Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader. And it also, if it also has some great Jedi characters and some great clone characters in it as well. And it's just a fun story. It's probably, I would describe it as the most, quote, fun of James Luceno's books. Heidi says, yay, Star Trek. Yes, I love talking about Star Trek. Arthur Lowry, hello, Arthur, says, hello, sir. Any chance Star Wars EU fans will see you at Legends Con in Texas in March 2025? I love your EU reviews. No, because there's not going to be any publishers there, and there's not going to be any book news to cover. The main reason I go to conventions, I do interviews, which is one reason, which there would be a lot of authors to interview at Legends Con. But the main reason I go is for breaking book news and to make connections with publishers. And they just won't be at that since it's a fan-run convention. It's exclusively for Star Wars. And I've interviewed some of the Star Wars authors before, not all of them. So I could get some interviews from that. But, Texas is a long way from where I live. So it'd be a big expense, and it's hard to justify that. However, I am thinking about for next year. I already got my tickets for LibertyCon. They went on sale today, and they probably already sold out. They sell out within minutes. But I got my LibertyCon tickets today, and then I'll go to DragonCon, and those are both near me, so I can easily pop up, pop down type thing. But if I'm going to attend a convention that's not in my local area, I really want to attend Dragonsteel next year in 2025 if they do it November, December, because a lot of publishers, a lot of authors go there, and it's specifically surrounding Brandon Sanderson's work, who's my favorite author. So if I go to a convention outside, it'll be that, not Legends Con. However, if they were to do Legends Con in, say, Chattanooga or in Atlanta or in Birmingham or in even Greenville, I might be able to make it in a future year. So I'm not totally opposed to it. It's just hard to justify that expense right now. Isaac Hall, hello, says, love your videos. Somewhat new viewer. Question is, do you ever read historical nonfiction? If so, any recommendations? I don't really read nonfiction on the channel very much. I do read it in my spare time, but I try to focus the channel on fiction. One historical nonfiction I'll recommend is The Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel by Douglas Brunt. That was a really excellent nonfiction I can recommend. And I am a huge fan of John Meacham's like his presidential biographies. So that stuff I really like. All right. Anakin says, I wish I could find someone who loves me as much as Jonathan loves the Kenobi novel. Oh, thank you. That's so nice. That's yes, I love the Kenobi novel. Yes, that is true. I love that book. City or Slitty, I think it's Slitty. Sorry about that. Says, hey Jonathan, what are your thoughts on the High Republic ending soon? Can they wrap it up in 2 books? Should they do more? Well, what they have is we have the other phase. We have a YA and middle grade book that come out this year, and then next year we have an adult. Young adult and middle grade coming out, so we still have a decent number of books. But the adult book is like the adult books are the main storyline, and I'm curious because if you've read Temptation of the Force, which is the book that just came out in June, you'll know that it has a very interesting cliffhanger ending. And I'm really curious if they can properly pay that off in a single book. But if anyone could, I think it's Charles Soule because he's an amazing writer. So we will see. We will see if they can pull it off. I was hoping that they would do like a May 4th release for Trials of the Jedi, but I think May the 4th next year is like a Sunday, so it looks like they're going to probably release it on May the 6th. They might not, but that's what the evidence that suggests. So it's really cool that they're releasing it near then. And I think they can. There's obviously going to be certain things that worked for the High Republic and certain things that didn't. And when I'm done with reading the whole thing, I'm going to do a whole post-mortem. I'm going to talk about everything that worked, everything that didn't work, how Lucasfilm should do the next book series, what to take from the High Republic then use, and what to take from the High Republic and not use, things like that. I'm excited to do that. Let's see. Thank you for the question, Slitty. Heidi says, for someone who loves fantasy sci-fi but is hesitant to start Star Wars, what would you recommend is the best starting point? What films to get started? Oh, it's not even if you for films, start with the original trilogy, of course. Read or watch 4, 5, 6, and then after that, if you're enjoying them, go back, do the prequels 1, 2, 3, and then after that, do all the Disney era 7, 8, 9, and Rogue One and Solo. And if you find yourself particularly enjoying the original trilogy, then I have and even the prequel trilogy as well. I have a video on where to start reading the EU, the expanded universe novels, which is the stuff that they wrote before Disney bought it. And then I also will be coming out soon with a where to start reading the canon, which is a much easier starting point because most of the canon is standalones or individual trilogies. There's only one overarching series for the canon, so I'll make that video eventually. But for movies, start with 4, 5, 6. Justin Miner, hello Justin, says, as for the High Republic ending, do you have any idea what era the next book project will take place? I long for the days of the New Jedi Order and Legacy of the Force. Yes. So I would actually say that the High Republic is the most comparable to the New Jedi Order of all the series they've done, because you had, in the New Jedi Order, there were multiple storylines and multiple character plots that you were following, and not every book had every character in it, and some of them were hardcover, some of them were paperback. And in the High Republic, you have some of them are adult books, some of them are middle grade, YA, so it's a little bit different in that sense, but it's still the grand scope feels similar. There's a new threat, the Nihil and the Nameless and stuff, and that's a big threat. So they're very comparable. If you're talking about the New Jedi Order era, I would highly doubt that they're doing anything with books like that, unless they cancel the Rey movie and say, we don't have anything planned for that. I don't think they're going to do anything in that era book-wise for a while. So what I expect them to do is to go back to the Old Republic. I think that you have 4,000 years, so you could just drop literally anywhere in there and talk about like a 5-year period and do a big trilogy or a big overarching series, like a 9-book series like Legacy of the Force or Fate of the Jedi. And you could do a big series like that. And because it's only 5 years out of like 4,000, it's not going to step on toes. If a filmmaker wants to come make an Old Republic movie, there's so much other time available. It's not like, whereas like most of the storyline now is between episodes 1 and 9. And so most of the storyline is very, squished in. You have to be careful what you step on. Whereas the Old Republic, there's a lot A lot of open space. So that's what I would expect them to go to next. What I would advise. I would love to see a Clone Wars book series, a la kind of like the High Republic, that focuses on not Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, but instead focuses on just everyday Jedi. I don't think that's the right business decision for Lucasfilm to make, but I think that's the right decision for me as a fan, because I'd love to see that. All right. Arthur says that makes sense about wanting to go for the publishers. Yeah. And it's like, as a fan, I love going to conventions as a fan. But now that I do the channel, more professionally, I need to be able to think about the business sense behind it. And I need to, conventions are expensive. It's not just the tickets. It's also the travel. It's if you're out of town, it's about the hotels and stuff. The food. Parking at conventions is ridiculous. It's ridiculous parking at a convention. I hate it. And so when you put all that stuff together, you may think, oh, the tickets are only $50 or $100. That's not bad. Well, when you add in all the other stuff, you're looking at $500 to $1,000. And that's not even including if you wanted to buy books at the convention and support the authors there. So the expenses are just getting ridiculous for conventions. So I have to manage it to the ones that are near me, so I don't have to pay as much, and then also the ones that I think will make the most business sense for the channel. All right, Heidi says, cool, I'll watch your video for Star Wars canon, but we'll watch the films until then. Good, I hope you enjoy them. They're really fun. If you just go in just wanting just fun storylines, you're going to have a blast with them. Fast Zach 84 says, for me, if you like the original trilogy, the best book to get in is Lost Stars, and for the prequels, Master and Apprentice and Dark Disciple. I like that. I don't like some of the things they did in Lost Stars romance-wise, but I do agree that it's an easy, if you like the original trilogy type thing for the canon. So that is a good recommendation. Fast Zach. Ramses says, hi, Jonathan. I hope you're having a good day, as well as everyone on here. Just got here. Acolyte thoughts. Should there be a season 2? Genuinely curious to know your opinion. I have been very I've been very careful to not talk about the Acolyte or any TV on the channel. So I'm not going to talk about the creative side of the Acolyte. I'm going to talk about the business side for a moment, which, most people don't seem as interested, but I am. Looking at what they spent on the Acolyte versus what the return was, I highly recommend not doing a season 2. The business side of it, they spent too much on it. They did not get a huge return in terms of viewership. The viewership has dipped below Andor, which was the lowest of the live action Star Wars shows. So they cannot financially justify making a season 2 and spending another $180 million. They will make a little bit of money back on some merchandising deals, which they have done a few merchandising deals that have been successful, but they're not going to make up the $180 million that they spent plus marketing. I don't even know what the marketing budget on the show was. So, for instance, compare that with Ahsoka. Ahsoka, the show, only cost $90 million, and it had much higher viewership, and of course it had some tie-ins as well financially. So at least Ahsoka, it didn't blow the doors off viewership-wise, but it justified maybe getting a season 2. This cost double for the same number of episodes, and financially just does not justify it. So that's all I'll say on that. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments on the Acolyte now. Isaac says, follow-up question, any reading habits you'd recommend practicing for a person that reads maybe a book a month at most? I am by nature, a goal-oriented person. This is something that my boss pulled me aside and said, so I didn't realize this about you before, but apparently you are very much goal-oriented. So what I would recommend is if you want to read more, I'd say you're going to read for 30 minutes a night, or maybe expand it to an hour every night, and you set aside that time to read. And you might be reading slow, you might be reading fast, but it just depends on your style. But if you set that goal of reading an hour a night, and then maybe after a couple months, you increase it to an hour and a half a night, and then 2 hours a night, you'll slowly see the amount that you're able to read increase. That's the best thing as a goal-oriented person. If you're not, or say, I am going to read 3 books, and that's like you're not allowed to, do movies until you read those books or something. If you set the goals, I think that's a good idea. Oh my goodness, so many of my students are here. Hello guys, great to see you all. Wow, that's really nice of y'all. So that's what I would recommend. Bryce, hello. Ramsey says, I mean, I thought it was interesting to see that they're supporting the Acolyte with extra material like a comic. Not sure the novels were announced as tie-ins. No, they're not. But when I mean merchandising, I mean like the lightsabers that they've made, the Funko Pops that will come out, the Black Series figures, things like that. That's the merchandising that's going to make the show that's going to like tie into the finances behind the show, not the novels or comics really. I think there was like one comic that was tied in officially, but that was like it. Let's see. This is not my real name. Oh, that is an interesting title there. It says, what do you think of character development of Brandon Sanderson, specifically the Mistborn trilogy? I'm about halfway through and enjoy it, but I don't feel connected to the characters. Well, I was super connected because I'm a big romance fan of like not like just straight up romance novels, but I like reading romance in my fantasy novels. So I was really connected to Vin and Ellen's relationship, even though they're not the most dynamic of characters. And also Ellen always wanting to go off and read and talk about politics. That also, connects with me. But I think he does a good job. I think that his best character work is in Warbreaker, Elantris, and in the Stormlight Archive. Those are much more stronger character stuff from him. His plot is stronger in the Mistborn trilogy and in his Reckoner, Reckoner series. That's what it's called. So that's how I feel. But he's my favorite author because his themes are my favorite. I love when he talks about religion, or when he talks about the role of government, and when he talks about all this stuff. Like, he asks questions that are interesting, and I often disagree with him on his answers to that stuff. But I find it so interesting the way he asks the questions. Raymond, Georgia Bulldogs, Bryce, good to see you all. This is not my real name. Says, also, how do you balance reading and teaching? I'm a teacher and read about a book a week. Do you find you spend most of your free time reading? Yes, most of my free time is reading, especially on the weekends that I don't have like marching band stuff, because I help out with that and other stuff. But I do read probably about 1 to 2 hours a night during the week. And then I read about 3 to 4 hours on weekends. On Saturday, Sunday, and that usually makes it so I can read about two books a week is my average during the school year. 2 books is pretty normal. Oh my goodness, my students, guys, y'all are making this interesting. A lot of these student comments in here, for y'all who are not aware, some of my students that I've had in previous years, and they are having fun in the comment section apparently. Caleb says, I missed you, Mr. Cohn. Oh, that's so nice, Caleb. I play Brookhaven with Bryce. What? I have no idea what you're talking about. All right, let's go down to Joel says, a question. What is your technique to read a book quickly? If you're talking about number of hours, it's just to schedule the reading time. If you're talking about like trying to actually read each page quickly, it's to put aside a phone, to I'm really good at being able to read like multiple words at once. I'm able to read a page really quick, but I don't know how to explain that. I'm not sure how to explain that to people. So this is not my real name. Says, also, I couldn't do this and have my students commenting on the stream. You're a brave man, sir. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they apparently found the video. Raymond says, what do you mean? Aren't you going to the high school? Yeah, I'm teaching 9th grade history next year. Ramsey says, I recommend reading Daisy Jones and the Six. It's written as a magazine interview, and the story, it's told from the character's POV, so they kind of contradict each other. It's quite interesting storytelling. Yes, I've seen that. I think it was like on Reese Witherspoon's book club, and so I saw it had a very interesting cover. So I've thought about reading that one eventually. I have other like contemporary books in front of my list to eventually read, but we'll see. Let's see, what's another comment. Thank you, Mallie, for good luck in high school. Good luck to y'all in middle school. Bryce Jones says, "What's the best way to finish my summer reading? To actually do it and not go on to live streams if you need to finish your summer reading." Aiden says, "Are you happy to teach in high school?" I am. I'm excited to read that. This is not my real name says, if you had to pick only reading Star Wars and Star Trek book versus everything else, what would you pick? Let's pretend there is enough Star Wars and Star Trek books to keep reading forever. Well, there kind of is, because Star Trek has 800 books in their catalog, and Star Wars has about, it depends. If you include just the adult books, it's about 200 something. But if you include young adult and middle grade, you're closer to like 400 something. So Star Trek and Star Wars have a decent amount. But even if I limited myself to just that, I would run out really quick. Also, there's a sense of freshness with like reading a new science fiction book that has no ties to any universe I've ever read in, or same thing for a new fantasy book or a new legal thriller. So I would have to pick the other simply because there's more opportunity. But I mean, you could spend. I know people who, it's gonna take me another 20 years to get through all the Star Trek books at the pace I'm at, and it may even take longer if I ever slow down. So it's gonna be difficult. All right, guys, we have to focus on the reading discussion. All right, where are we at? Mally says I'm on chapter 2 of my summer reading. Good. My favorite book is Elantris, Caleb. That is my favorite book. What is This Is Not My Real Name says, on that, which do you prefer overall, fantasy or sci-fi? I think I'm on team fantasy. Generally, my answer for years has been fantasy. That's been my answer for like, a long time. However, uh, uh, sci-fi is really becoming my new favorite recently in the last couple of months, because I've been reading some great like exploratory sci-fi, like Ben Bova's series and the Mary Robinette Kowal's Lady Astronaut series, and I'm excited to get to like the Red Mars, and so stuff like that is really exciting me. All right, let's keep reading. Heidi says, I'm here for the Star Trek, so keep reviewing them, but I'm excited to start Star Wars thanks to you. Just having difficulty getting through book 4 of the A Time 2 series. It's just so hard to get through. I agree. The A Time 2 series is very, very difficult. The A Time 2 series, the A Time 2 series gets good at the end, and it was okay at the beginning, but like the middle stuff was really difficult. So I agree. But once you finish the A Time 2 series, you can get to the other Star Trek overarching series that are also really good. Let's see. This Is Not My Real Name says, as you read so much, have you ever considered writing a book? If so, what would it be about? I have written material, not for public consumption yet. Okay, boys. Come on. Anyway, sorry, I had to deal with something. So, yes, I have written stuff. It's not for public consumption yet. I might write in the future. At the moment, my job is focused on teaching and then also reading the books, and it would be a lot to adding writing professionally. So maybe one day. Ramsey says, do you keep a wide range of genres in your TBR or just fantasy sci-fi? I still struggle to pick up new books out of a shelf because I don't know how to go about picking a good book. So what I do is I have every month, I have an EU Star Wars book. I have one Star Trek book. I have one fantasy book. I have one sci-fi book. I have one like either legal thriller or like contemporary type book, or I have a few other type things, and I might go into like a genre blending, maybe a horror book or something, and then the last couple of books tend to be like new releases, and that's what my TBR is. So it's very wide. If you look at my YouTube videos over the last several months, you'll see there's a wide variety. It's never just Star Wars or just Star Trek. It's very much all types of genres, which I think is really good because it keeps me energized. If I feel this fantasy book didn't work, pff, boom, sci-fi, or this didn't work, boom, I have a Star Wars book that I'm excited about. So that's how I do that. Alex. says, "Hi, Jonathan. I'm just here to say I disagree." For those of you who don't know, that's an inside joke between Alex and I. Alex is on Twitter, and he's very entertaining. Raffinetti says, "I'm halfway through Jedi Battle Scars. I was aware of the spicy content before going in and how badly it was received, but knowing ahead of time, I just laugh at those sections. I can't laugh. I can't laugh at that. It was painful. It was painful." Uh, 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 I Am Pilgrim, or Raymond, there's millions of books out there I haven't read. I Am Pilgrim says, I just finished The Silverblood Promise last night. It's the best fantasy book I've read in a long time. I know. I just finished it on Tuesday, so my review will be come out in about a month. And oh my goodness, it is an amazing book. And the YouTubers who talk about it are underselling it. Mike from Mike's Book Reviews and Petrick and Library of Viking and Murphy, they all talked about, and they all enjoyed it, but they didn't say it was like the best book of the year or anything. This is the best fantasy book I've read all year for sure. And it is one of the best debuts, like first books by an author that I've read in quite a long time. So I'm really loving The Silverblood Promise. I will read book 2 the day it comes out, unless I get early copy it, because I loved that book. So I'm with you. Bryce says, "I would love to read a horror book for you." So I can recommend actually for you guys some horror books. I have the Small Spaces. This is middle grade. These are my students that were asking that question. I have the Small Spaces Quartet. This one's set in the fall. This one's set in the winter. This one's set in the spring, and this one's set in the summer. It's like middle grade horror, so it's more on some of y'all's level, and it's definitely worth it. And then I also can recommend these 2 books, Camp Scare and Mine by Delilah Dawson. These are also good middle grade horror books. I've read some adult horror recently, but I'm not going to recommend that to y'all. All right, where was I? This is not my real name says, "What booktubers do you watch the most?" I watch you, Library of a Viking, Daniel Green, and some others. So the number one booktuber I've watched the most for the last several years was Brian Lee Durfee. But if you know him, you know that he got sick recently and has not been posting really. He posts like once every couple of weeks to let us know he's okay, but that's about it. So without Brian posting every day now, I watch all of Mike's videos from Mike's Book Reviews. I also watch some of Daniel's videos, although he's not book reviewing as much anymore. He's doing other stuff. I sometimes watch Murphy's stuff. I try to watch a lot of Caleb Likes books. He's a friend of mine, so I try to read all of his stuff. I really enjoy his stuff. So those are the booktubers I most often follow. But I have like 30 or 40 that I'm subscribed to that I see their videos pop up and I watch some of their videos, but I can't watch all of them. We can't watch all our favorite authors or booktubers. Raffinetti says, "I devoured Star Wars Most Wanted last week, read it in 3 days. What are your thoughts on it?" I really enjoyed it when I initially read it. But since then, it hasn't like stuck with me as much. I really like the character of Kira, and I really like what they did with her and Han in Solo. So I really like the tie-in aspects of the book. I think it ties into Solo better than, say, Last Shot, which was also the tie-in for Solo. But I really enjoyed the book. It's not top tier of the YA books, but it's not the bottom tier for me. It's in the good category. It's a pretty good book. Then let's see. Mally says you should read more horror books. I'm working on it. I have lots of books I've been reading. Davis says, "I have a rec for you. This month's Asimov's has a science fiction story about a teacher who has to deal with required tech in the classroom." I don't want to read about like too close to real life though. Asimov's. Do you mean the magazine? Because I don't read the stuff that comes in magazines. Occasionally they'll get reprinted in like a book, like a short story collection. So let's see. Chaos says, "How are you?" I'm doing good. More of my students in the chat. This is not my real name says, "Has a book ever made you ugly cry?" For me, it was Wrath by John Gwynne. Loved Gar's character. Oh, I understand. I understand what you mean with that. That was a good book, Wrath. Books that have made me cry. Kenobi made me emotional, which everybody knows that. I would say, the Star Trek Coda books. Oh, those were emotionally heavy for me. Definitely that. What other books really had me emotionally? Manta's Gift by Tim Zahn. Oh, that book. I felt emotional at points in that book. Um, uh, the some of the Dune prequels by Kevin Anderson. Those books I felt a real emotional connection to. So those are the ones I would recommend. Let's see. Where am I at? Steve Holmes says, "Are you hyped for Stormlight 5?" I am. I talked at the beginning of the stream that I mentioned that they're releasing the chapters once a week on Wednesdays. If you're interested in reading them, I don't do that because I read everything in print. So I will read the series when it comes out. I will read the book, on release day probably, or start it on release day. I won't be able to read the whole thing. That'd be ridiculous. But I'm excited to read it. I'm curious on like if it's going to feel truly final for the series, because we know there's 5 more that's set 10 years later on, but I'm really curious to see how it's going to wrap everything up for our current characters. I wonder if anyone has bets on like who's going to live, who's going to die. I have some ideas. I think it would be interesting if certain characters live. There's certain ones I don't like. Man, I do not want anything to happen to Adolin. I really don't want anything to happen to Adolin, but I'm not sure he's safe. So let's see. All right, guys, you got to be careful with what you're putting in the chat. Let's see, where am I? Raffinetti says, "Have you ever delved into Star Wars comic books?" I've read some of them. You can actually see up here are some of my comics for Star Wars. I've read some of the 2015, I think it was the 2015 runs of the Star Wars and Darth Vader. I read the 2017 run, the first couple issues of the Darth Vader one. I read the first few issues of the Poe Dameron comic. My favorite Star Wars comic is the what's it called? The Shattered Empire comic. That's my favorite by far. And then I did read the Kanan. That's the hardcover comic you see back there. So I don't read it too much, and I think I read the Shadow Squadron, the one that tied into the Alphabet Squadron books, but that one didn't really go anywhere, so it was kind of boring. But I'm not a comic reader. I'm focused on prose. I have some manga I'm trying out soon, but generally I prefer to read prose if I can. All right. Raymond says, Mr. Combbanks says hi. Hello. Where am I? Davis Comics says, yes, Asimov's July, August 24. I read the mags to read a wide variety of new authors, ideas, etc. Yeah, I get that. It's just, I have so many novels and short story collections in that form that it's, magazines would just be too much to try to add to my rotation. Maybe sometime in the future, but at the moment won't probably work. This is not my real name says, also, do you like special edition books like Broken Binding editions? I don't see many on your shelves. No, I am, I do not like to have to fork over, $100 for a book or $150 when I can get the book for $20. Traditionally, I will take a paperback or a traditional hardcover any day. That's why I didn't participate in Brandon Sanderson's secret projects. I could have read the books, when they came out and talked about them when everyone else was talking about them. But I read traditional hardcovers, traditional paperbacks. If you like, collector's editions, that's fine. But if I have $100 to spend on books, I want to buy 5 $20 books instead of one $100 book. There's a few, like I want to get the Leatherbound of Elantris one day. I would love to have that, but I don't need that right now. It's not like a focus for me. Let's see where I'm at. I'm Pilgrim says, have you read the Maze Runner series? For young adult, I thought it was phenomenal. I intend to read it soon. I've been going through a lot of the BYU authors for a lot of them, and I'm enjoying them. I'm currently, my YA middle grade series I'm reading is Fablehaven, but I'm considering doing Maze Runner as the series I read after Fablehaven, so probably Q1 of 2025. Let's see. Ramses says, I'm about to finish phase 1 of the High Republic. I seriously cannot believe how good Mission to Disaster was. I know! I've been telling everyone Mission to Disaster is the best middle grade book that they've put out for Star Wars. And like they're for the canon at least. And nobody talked about it when it came out. And it was so frustrating. Anyway, where was I? I'm still a little thrown off by the way the storylines flow by author, not medium format. Yes, it is very confusing how they kind of flow in that some of the adult books go down to the middle grade and the middle grade goes to YA. The adult books are the easiest to follow because they generally follow the same characters, but some of the middle grade YA pop up, pop down type thing. It can get very confusing. I think they should have I don't even need to do my post-mortem to say on the series to say that they should have just made it the adult books follow these characters, the YA exclusively follows these ones, and the middle grade exclusively follows these ones. That's what they should have done, but they didn't go that direction. But Mission Disaster is a terrific sequel to A Test of Courage. Like those two pair up perfectly, and I love those two books. I much prefer the Vernestra in those books. Hunter says, figured I'd ask you what you think of the Aftermath books and the Alphabet Squadron books, and has your view changed over them over the years? Going to read them later this year. Yes. So when I read Aftermath first, I thought it was okay. And when I read the Alphabet Squadron books, I liked it. Over time, however, the Aftermath books I've actually really, really, really liked and reread, and I really enjoyed them more recently when I read them. The Alphabet Squadron books did not work on reread and rethinking them. So I really now like I would put that's my least favorite of the canon trilogies, unfortunately. Maybe if you're including YA, maybe the Padme trilogy's below it, but I just didn't care for it afterwards. So let's see where I'm at. Ramses says, how could they finish Mari's story in Out of the Shadows? I know that should have been in the adult books because that was an adult storyline that they were telling. I am so frustrated that they did anyway. Yes. So yes, I totally agree with you, Ramses. That was a big mistake that they made in the publishing schedule. This is not my real name. Says, do you have an e-reader? I love collecting books, so would never buy one. What are your opinions? I have no e-reader. Nope, don't have one. Ramsey says, you should get into the Star Wars comics. They're really entertaining, especially the Kira trilogy. Are you talking about the Crimson Empire, Crimson Reign comics? I've thought about that. You know, the problem is that a comic, you know, you pay $15 for the bind up and I read it in 45 minutes. Whereas a novel, I pay $20 for it and I read it in 5 or 6 hours. So you're not getting as much bang for your buck with the comics. And I know that it's the artwork that you're buying, but you know, I want to spend more of the money on the story itself. And so that's why I don't read them quite as much. Let's see where I'm at. Chaos says, why does Shattered Empire remind me of Mistborn? Because Mistborn has the Final Empire is the name of that first book. Super Saiyan Spin says, hey Jonathan, what did you think about The Acolyte? I personally loved it, being a High Republic fan, but I'm so nervous about Vern's story going forward, though. I loved her in the books. I also loved her in the books, and I did not enjoy Acolyte very much. I like the first 2 episodes. After that, I didn't enjoy it at all. But I talked earlier in the stream that I, from a business sense, absolutely would not do a season 2. I think it would be, you know, totally wrong to do a season 2 from a business perspective. And I also broke it down in detail on my Twitter account. Alex, I know what you're trying to do, Alex. Don't try to goad me. I'm not doing that. Raffinetti says, do you have any expectations for the Mace Windu book coming out next month? It's not coming out next month. They pushed it back to October, which is frustrating. So it's actually coming out in October. So if I just broke that news for you, I'm sorry. But it is. I'm excited for it. I did not particularly love that author's previous Star Wars novel. He did Stephen Barnes did the Cestus Deception, which I didn't care for, but I'm hoping that he delivers a good one here. I think it might be entertaining. So let's hope. All right, let's see. I'm seeing some of these comments are weird. I'm Pilgrim says, silly question, but when you read hardcovers, do you keep the jacket on or remove it? Oh, I always keep it on. I always keep on the jacket. I never remove jackets, except for when I have to put on my special protective covers. Like like this book, it has the reason it glistens so much is it has a special. So that's the only time I ever take the jacket off the book is to put on the special protective covering. Other than that, keep it on at all times is my rule. Space Nerd says, is Way of Kings a great way to get into Brandon Sanderson? Yes, but it's an incredibly long book. That's the problem with recommending Way of Kings. It's an incredibly long book. It is, it's 1,100 pages, 1,200 pages. Whereas if you read Warbreaker or Mistborn or Elantris first, they're only like 600 pages long, so it's much easier to get into. And like for Warbreaker and Elantris, it's standalone, so you get to see him do a beginning, middle, and end. And then for Mistborn, it's a simple trilogy, whereas the Stormlight Archive is huge. So if you're willing to go through an enormous book, sure, go for it. It's one of his most lauded books. But if you're like, I want a little something shorter, Mistborn, Elantris, and Warbreaker, those are the books that I recommend for people just getting into it. All right, I'm putting some of you in timeout. Let's see where I'm at. Jake says, I saw that you did a Fate of the Jedi review series last year. I'm starting Legacy of the Force later, so I was curious if you preferred Legacy of the Force or Fate of the Jedi or liked both. I enjoy both. I prefer Fate of the Jedi, certainly. Legacy of the Force is an entertaining series, but compared to Fate of the Jedi, compared to the New Jedi Order, compared to some of the others, it is not as good. But I still enjoyed it. It was fun. And the fifth book in that series is heartbreaking. If you've read the fifth Legacy of the Force book. All right, let's see where I'm at. This is not my real name. What's the longest book you've read in one day? Like I've read some 400-500 page books in a single day. I don't know specifically. What I'll say is the fastest I've ever read any book is earlier this year. I read The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, which is 1,000 pages, really small print. And I read it in only 3 days, which for me, ridiculously fast. So that's the fastest I've read a major book like that. And I also read the sequel that in 3 days as well. So I have a history of that. This is not my real name. Says it's on my summer holidays to-do list. Yes, I hope I could pace yourself with it if you're not used to doing that, because you might not enjoy the book if you're focused on just plowing through it in a day. But I do it. 300-page books I will plow through in a day sometimes. Ramses says, so should they wrap up any remaining questions for the Acolyte through publishing? Absolutely. That is exactly what I recommend. Publishing, the book fans tend to be much more nice and forgiving of especially the High Republic fans. So that is the direction you should go to do the Acolyte. The rest of it, it's cheap. You don't have to do any, you don't have to deal with the major press, because the major people attacking it aren't going to pay attention to the books that much. I would also say that they could do it in an animated. I think it would be okay in animated form, because animation, you spend $1 million per episode, whereas live action, you're spending $20 million an episode. So it's worth the cost. But the attention from the people who hated it will still kind of be there with animation, not as much, but a little bit. But if you do books, you can tell the story. It's probably going to do fine. So that's what I would recommend. But it's unfortunately they're not making up the money that they spent on the Acolyte show. That money is just lost. It's no way to really, even with tie-ins, it's not going to come back, sadly. All right, where am I? Raffinate says, I wonder if I should read Shatterpoint before The Glass Abyss. Well, they're two different, timelines. One's in EU, one's in canon, and it's not the same author. So it's not like with Thrawn, it was the same author, same character, and he was tying them together kind of. Whereas the Glass Abyss, I think it's just going to be in a standalone. So you can if you want to, but I wouldn't require it or anything. All right. Let's see. Time Waster. Favorite nonfiction book that you read last year? What was my favorite? Probably the Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel by Douglas Brunt, probably. All right. Caleb says, what's your favorite book series? Favorite series of books. It's got to be the Rune Lords series by David Farland. The Rune Lords series is really good. I Am Pilgrim says, in the age-old battle of paperbacks versus hardcovers, which form do you prefer to read the most? Okay, so like when I'm reading an individual book, I love reading paperbacks because I can hold them in my hands for longer without getting tired, and I find the experiences a lot more fun. Hardcovers, are generally that I read are new releases, so they have an excitement behind them, which helps. So I like it, and also hardcovers tend to have a bigger font size, which I appreciate. But hardcovers are heavier and harder to hold in your hand, so there's pros and cons with both. I'd say paperbacks, and paperbacks are cheaper than hardcovers, so I'd say paperbacks technically win, but there's advantages to both. And I talked about the advantages and disadvantages in one of my first videos I did for the channel, the paperbacks versus hardcovers. Where am I at? Drew says, do you have any recommendation for my first indie pub fantasy book? All right, so here's what I'm going to recommend for indie pub. Morgan Shank has a trilogy called A Low Country. The first book's A Low Country, second book's A Savage Country, third book's A Silent Country. Those are great. I'd also recommend the book I'm actually reading right now. I'm halfway through it, but I can recommend it, and that is Ascendant: Songs of Chaos. This is already going to be a top book of the year for me. So it's amazing. This is basically if Anne McCaffrey wrote How to Train Your Dragon. All right, so that's how I describe that book. I haven't read a ton of indie pub. I've read probably 10 or 15 indie pub books in my life. So, and some of them were great, some of them weren't. So I can't, I'm not a huge reader of them. I try to read about one a month now, but it just depends. All right. Where am I at? Chaos says, also, I'm on the 5th Mistborn, by the way. Oh, so you're on Shadows of Self. Oh, that one has a great ending. Mitchu says, what a pleasant surprise. Good afternoon. Great to see you, Mitchu. This is not my real name. Says, do you prefer the new Star Wars canon books or the TV shows? Books, of course. Easy, clear. I love the TV shows. I love The Mandalorian. I love Andor. I love Ahsoka. And I still enjoyed Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett. But books, obviously. If they said we're never doing TV shows, we're never doing movies, but we're only doing the Star Wars books, and we're doing like one a month, I would be the happiest person on earth because I love the books that much. That's what I really focus on. All right, where am I at? Dusty Smith says, you look like a young Daniel Vittori. I have no idea. Who is Daniel Vittori? I'll look him up later, but I always get told I look like a young Bill Gates, and my response is, I wish I had his money. Raffinetti says, what's your favorite autobiography that I've read? Autobiography. I really liked the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger. His biography was fantastic. So honest about stuff. He was very honest in that book. So I would say that. Although I also really liked reading George W. Bush's autobiography because he got into some interesting stories about his life there. So those two, I would say, for autobiographies. For biographies, my favorite is the biography of H.W. Bush by John Meacham. Mally, it's because they were talking about stuff they didn't even talk about in the chat, so that's why. All right, where am I at? Heidi says, how in the world do you organize your bookshelves? I love seeing all those books. Until now, I've donated them, and I'm regretting that decision. So I will show you really quick. You won't be able to see everything, but I'll give you the quick, 10-second tour. And so right over here, you can't see it because the light's there, but that is my Star Trek shelves. And then at the bottom, I have my horror stuff and some of my John Grisham books. And then on these shelves, I have media tie-in fiction that's kind of generalized. Like I have Halo, Gears of War, the Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance up there. From here on, it gets to fantasy here, and can't show all of it, but it goes fantasy all the way to the bottom by different genre, like things like tour paperbacks here, miscellaneous paperbacks here, hardcovers and trade paperbacks here, things like that. Then this is my favorites shelf. This is the one that doesn't really change that much. I have, my favorite fantasy stuff, like the Shannara. I have the Elizabeth Hayden books. I have the David Farland books, The Wheel of Time, the Brandon Sanderson. That's where I put that. So that's all fantasy here on, and then Star Trek. Then over here we have Star Wars canon, and then some Star Wars Legends books at the bottom. EU Legends here, and then that's supposed to be moved. Then down here I have my YA and middle grade at the bottom. And then over here, if I can get it, I have my science fiction, and then you really can't see it well because of the glare, but I have a whole shelf of science fiction over here. So that's how I hope I didn't make anyone dizzy with that, but that's how I organize them. Dusty Smith says, have you ever read Greg Keyes? Yes, I've read his 3 Star Wars books, and I want to read his fantasy books, but they never have like a full trilogy by him in my local bookstore. They only have like one book, like the middle book, or they have the 3rd book, or maybe the 1st book. But if I ever see his whole trilogy, I'll snatch it up. But right now, I don't have any of his fantasy stuff, but I've read his Star Wars stuff, and it was really good. This is not my real name, says, wow, that just jumped a bit. Sorry. Says, do you DNF books, or do you just keep going and then just not carry on if it's part of a series? Bingo. I read a whole book and then I'll decide if I continue on with the series or not. Every year I DNF maybe one book, but I don't talk about it on the channel, because if I didn't finish the book, it's not fair to the author to talk about it on the channel or review it on Goodreads. But I like, out of 150 books per year that I read, 100 to 150, I only DNF one. So it takes a lot. And even the books I highly dislike, I still read to completion, because that's, my job. So I try to do that. Lydia Jones says, have you read Sword of Kaigan? No, but I've heard good things from the people who have read it. Do you recommend it? Ramsey says, I started a career illustrating children's books. It's finally published. Excellent. Got any advice for when it comes to navigating the industry side of publishing, business, or else? One thing I'll say, and other people in the business will say this, if you can, go to conventions for your type of thing. Like, go to publishing conventions that deal with illustrators of kids' books or illustrators of novels or whatever, and try to get to know the other people in the business, the other illustrators, get to know the editors, get to know the people in the business. And you don't even have to, pitch to them. Just get to know them as friends. And then when you are ready to pitch, you will have an established relationship. So that's the great thing about conventions. Most of the people that went to LibertyCon that I went to recently, the whole reason they were there was to make the connections with the publishers. So that's what I would highly recommend. All right. Felder says, hey, Jonathan, I love your videos. What series have you read that's most similar to A Song of Ice and Fire? As far as generational families, houses, political drama, power struggle, maybe adventure travel. Everyone else doesn't talk about this book because nobody's read it. But that is an easy answer for me. And that is the Wake of the Dragon series by Kevin J. Anderson. The first book is Spine of the Dragon. The second book is Venge War or Venja War. And the third book is Gods and Dragons. It is a trilogy. It is complete. The books are fairly short compared to, the Song of Ice and Fire books. They're only like 500 pages. But the political intrigue, the family dynamics, there's some dragons in there, of course, and some like the adventure travel. This trilogy is the spiritual successor to the Game of Thrones series. Like, other series say, oh, it's similar. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, you'll enjoy it. No, this is basically, I describe it as Game of Thrones light. That's how I describe it. So, Philologus, I hope, Philologus, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm sorry. Says, that Star Trek is way better than Star Wars when you are going, than Star Wars. So when are you going to move those Star Wars books and put Star Trek behind you again? I disagree with your premise. I love them both, but Star Wars is a little bit higher for me. But the biggest problem is, like, where can I fit it? Like I keep my fantasy stuff here, Star Wars here. Like, it's hard to fit it in unless I only do like a part of my fantasy books, a part of my Star Wars, a part of my Star Trek, part of my sci-fi. It just wouldn't fit properly and with the flow of the room that I like. So that's why it has to be over there. So I'm sorry. Michu says, do you keep every book you buy? Yes. I have unhauled a handful of books before when I got duplicates, or like I had the hardcover and was gifted a paperback, or vice versa. And if I have the whole, for instance, I have the first 6 books of this series, and then I had one of them in hardcover. And once I got the last one in paperback, I got rid of the hardcover because I didn't need it because it matched. Now, sometimes I have duplicates. Like for the Rune Lords, since it's my favorite series, I have the hardcovers and the paperbacks, but that's rare. Usually, I just keep one copy of each book. And now the publishers are sending me books. Now it's getting crowded on my bookshelves. I have over 1,000 books on my shelves now, between all of my shelves. And this not even my nonfiction shelves are actually in my bedroom because I couldn't fit them in the space here, which I call my space here the conservatory. This is not my real name. Says, do you think Mistborn would make a better TV show than A Song of Ice and Fire? Who would you cast for Mistborn? Well, yes, I would want it to be a TV show. I'm not the best with casting because, a lot of the cast has to be younger. So like it has to be young adults, and I don't know as many younger, like 20 somethings, in the acting space. And most of the ones I know are like the most obvious choices. And they don't need, like, Tom Holland does not need to be in it. He's in everything. And I love him, but he's in everything. We also have, Timothy Chalamet. He's in everything. He's great, but so like I don't know for casting, but I think it'd make a great TV show, and I think it would not be wise to make it a movie, and that's where Brandon wants to go, is to make it a movie, and I think that's a bad decision to make it a movie. I Am Pilgrim says, I've never read any Star Wars books, which I'm embarrassed about. Would you recommend Legends or the new canon as a starting point? Well, it depends on what you like, what parts of Star Wars. The new canon has a lot of standalones, so you can just pick it up anywhere generally and have fun with it. But the Legends timeline is more rewarding as of right now. But and the Legends timeline, for all intents and purposes, is complete. So I'd suggest starting with the Heir to the Empire trilogy by Timothy Zahn. And then if you really like that, you can continue on with the Legends books. And then if you don't love that, maybe try some of the canon books. We'll see. That's what I'd say. Raffinetti says, you do like a young Bill Gates. I know, everybody says that. Everybody says that. It's so frustrating. Daniel Enrique says, where do you buy the hardcover sleeves? I got them from, what's the name of that place? I got them from Brian Lee Durfee's recommendation. Demco. I got the Demco sleeves. That's where I got them from. And I think they come in like batches of 50. And some of them, I bought one myself. And then for a couple years ago, like 2 years ago, I got 2 for Christmas. So I got like 150 sleeves. So I still have quite a few left. That's what I get. Let's see where I'm at. Daniel Enrique says, when a Star Wars bookshelf tour? Greetings from Mexico. Well, I did a bookshelf tour of the whole shelves like a year or so ago, but I'll just, briefly show you. I have High Republic at the top up there. Then I have Canon all the way down. And then down from here down is the Legends hardcovers. And then I have the Legends EU mass market paperbacks down to here. So that's my Star Wars bookshelf. Girick Sakar says, have you read Children of Time? No, I'm not sure I'd enjoy it. After I've heard, certain reviews about it, I'm not sure if I'll love it. I'm interested in it, but it's not a priority yet. Heidi says, love the bookshelf tour. Thank you, Heidi. Raffinetti says, have there ever been students of yours that you've discussed fantasy books with after class or just nerding out? Actually, the comment right below you from Chaos. Chaos was one of my students, and he reads Brandon Sanderson, and we had a lot of fun talking about. But most of them know. Caleb, people were talking about stuff in the comments they did not need to be doing. That's why I banned them. Raffinetti said, I would recommend looking up which books have your favorite character and start from there. There are some gems in both canon and Legends. That's exactly the correct answer, Raffinetti. Good answer. We just talked about the protectors. Heidi says, where do you put your TBRs? I have mine on a shelf and feel so happy watching it get smaller and smaller. I cannot show you because the light is like my lighting is literally in the way, but I have I go about 2 months in the future with my TBRs and I put them at the top of the shelves. And again, I also, like you, love seeing it decrease. And then once I've gotten through all the books for 1 month, I slide the second month over and start another month TBR thing. So that's what I do. This is not my real name says, what about Johnny Depp as Kelsier? That's interesting. I don't know if I'd do that. I don't know if I do that. From a business sense, he's a little bit of a lightning rod. I'm not sure I'd want that publicity, but also he could probably do an okay job with it. But he just doesn't personify Kelsier for me. I would expect a more serious, dramatic actor for Kelsier. That's what I would expect. And someone else said, consume the bourgeoisie says too old. I'd say yes. I would agree with the him being a little old for the role now. Super Saiyan Spin says, love hearing someone talk about Fate of the Jedi. I read them in 2021 and loved them. I just finished Outcast for the second time a few weeks ago. Do you have a favorite from that series? Yes, I do. So the first 3 books were good, didn't love them. Then books 4 and 5 really enjoyed. And then book 6, and then 7, 8, 9 leveled up. But my favorite in the series is Ascension, followed really closely by Apocalypse. And these are the last 2 books in the series, book 8 and 9. So it's like it was their neck and neck just about, but Ascension just barely gets it because of the romance. And I loved these 2 books. These are top tier Star Wars for me. So that's what I'd recommend or not recommend, but say those are my favorites. This is not my real name says, how many books do you reread or do you prefer to go on new books? I try to read new books. If I reread, it's only for these reasons. If I'm doing a podcast like Star Wars, the Star Wars podcast, Two Sons of Tatooine, or the Star Trek podcast, why am I blanking on it? The Literary Treks. Both of those I will reread for. Other than that, I try not to reread because I have hundreds and hundreds of books on my shelves to get through. Plus, I have hundreds, if not thousands, of books that I want to read that are new to me. So if I'm rereading a book, I'm not reading something new. I'm reading something I've read before. So I try to limit it. That being said, sometimes it's fun to reread. So I might do one every couple months, but I try not to reread too much. But you look at my friend Caleb from Caleb Likes Books. He loves rereads. He does them all the time, as does Brian Lee Durfee. Let's see, where am I at? Hunter says, is it wise to pair Rebel Rising and Inferno Squad? I saw some people say that, and I figured I would ask you. I would actually pair Rebel Rising with Catalyst. That's what I would pair together. Inferno Squad, maybe, but I would say Rebel Rising and Catalyst work perfectly together. Read Catalyst first, then read Rebel Rising. That's what I would recommend. And then watch the movie Rogue One, and then after Rogue One, read Inferno Squad. That's the plan for it. That's how I would recommend it. Ramsey says, do you play Star Wars video games? Excited for Outlaws? I wish we were getting books for Outlaws. I don't know why they have not announced books for Outlaws yet. I just don't get it. But the games I don't actually really play. I played last year about half, or if not a little bit more than half of the Knights of the Old Republic because my friend wanted me to in the summer. But other than that, I really just don't play video games of any type, really. I think I play like Minecraft to just blow off steam every once in a while, or Civilization. I love the video game, The Guild 2, but it's not for Apple computers, so can't play it anymore. But I used to play it back in the day. Let's see where I'm at. Super Saiyan says, yes, same for me, top tier for sure. That's my real name says, Star Wars or Star Trek? Which do you think is better overall? Everything included. I love Star Wars. Like, that's my number one franchise. But Star Trek is very near and dear to my heart. But I think Star Trek has more misses than Star Wars books generally. But I love both. So I do not like pitting them against each other. But Star Wars is my franchise. Let's see where I'm at. Raffinate says, have you read some Witcher books? No, but I intend to. Nunya Business. Wow, that is quite the name. Nunya Business says, have you read Word and the Void series yet? I'm working on it right now. Actually, my Word and Void second book review posted today on the channel. And I will be reading the third book next week. And the review will go up in a couple weeks. So Ramsey says, Jonathan, I was looking for your podcast. It's not available on YouTube. No, it's not on YouTube. It is an audio only podcast. We have it on, like, if you have an iPhone, if you go to the podcasts app, you can find it there. If you have an Android, it's also in podcasts. I think if you can't find it, if you're having trouble with those, look up on your search bar on like a computer, look up Two Sons of Tatooine Simplecast, and you'll find it. But we're an audio only. We're not on YouTube or anything, just because YouTube's not really friendly to podcast as much, and also just we haven't gone visual or anything. Let's see where we're at. Heidi says, you're great, Jonathan. Love your channel. Thanks for doing such a long Q&A. Yes, I'll be ending it in just a few minutes, y'all. So getting the last questions now. But yes, it's been fun. Thanks for being here, Heidi. Raf, where am I at? Raffinetti says, what's the first book that comes to mind when reading this sentence? I wish I could boast about having read this book, but I still haven't. I wish I could boast about having read this book, but still haven't. I don't know. I don't, maybe. I know the answer. I know the answer. Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. I really want to read it, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Super Saiyan Spin says, have you read the Dresden Files? I'm starting book 2. I've read the first 6 Dresden Files, and book 2 is the weakest of all of them. But I intend to read book 7 in September. That's my plan. This is not my real name says, I notice your videos are mainly single take. Is this to save time? Would you play with your editing style? No hate. Love your videos. Thank you. I just don't like editing. It's just not something I enjoy. Like, it's the least favorite part of YouTube for me. So I just do them in one take. And then occasionally, like, see, people think they're all one take. Some of them, there's a subtle edit because I'll sneeze or I'll, something will happen. But I generally do it in one take because that, and also I want it to be like a stream of consciousness thing. You're seeing my general read. So that's what I typically like about that. Hello, Bull Run. Felder says, if books were being banned in the world, punishable by death, but you were given a choice of 5 books to save, what would they be? All right. Number 1 is obviously the Bible, of course. I mean, that's an easy answer. Number 2 for me is Elantris. Number 3, Warbreaker, both by Brandon Sanderson. I won't pick any more of his. Book 4, Manta's Gift by Timothy Zahn. Book 5, the 48 Laws of Power. There we go. Where am I at? Consume the Bourgeoisie says, I tried reading the Dresden Files after seeing a lot of positive reviews, but the main character's inner thoughts on women gave me the ick. Well, yeah, it's not going to work for everyone. Super Saiyan Spin says, good to know. Thanks for answering my questions. Love your Star Wars book reviews. Thank you, Super Saiyan Spin. Raffinetti says, what's your favorite romance in a Star Wars book? I love what they did with Mara Jade and Luke in the Vision of the Future. Loved what they did with them in that book. But Tim Zahn doesn't write like serious romance much. If I had to think somewhere else, probably would be in Ascension, the stuff between Ben and what's her name, the Sith. Would I put any canon on there? I really liked the romances in the, what is the name of that book? Why am I blanking on it? Oh, in Dark Disciple. I love the romance in Dark Disciple. This is not my real name says, which big author would you like to see write a Star Wars book? All right, I'm going to answer this as quickly as I can. Big authors tend to not come to Star Wars because the Star Wars books sell less than they do. The hierarchy is like, you have like way up here at the top, you have the top best-selling authors for the genre of fantasy sci-fi. And then well below them, you have Star Wars books. And then well below them is the majority of the science fiction fantasy authors. The Star Wars authors are like the mid-listers, generally. Sometimes they get on the New York Times list, sometimes they don't. And so for Star Wars, they generally get mid-listers or below because they can afford them. If I'm, say, Brandon Sanderson, who I'd love to see a Star Wars book from, he would lose money compared to if he wrote his own original works. If George Martin, if he wrote a Star Wars book, he would lose money. So because of that, it doesn't make sense for them to participate. So I generally am not like requesting a major author, mega bestseller to do that. That being said, Boy, I would love a legal drama set in the Star Wars universe by John Grisham. I don't even know if he's a fan, but man, would that be entertaining to see a legal drama from him in Star Wars. That'd be fun. Last couple questions. Bull Run. So, have you read the book Grendel? I have no idea what Grendel is. I'm sorry. I'll have to look it up. Raphane says, thanks for the Q&A. Love your work. Ramsey says, do you watch any Star Wars YouTubers or just stick to BookTube? I used to watch more Star Wars YouTubers, but they just got so rough to watch. If everything you do is angry and mean, I'm not interested. And then if you also only do the positive and never have a criticism, then I also don't like that either. And most of the ones I was following were in the two camps. That being said, I still enjoy Grace Randolph's Star Wars videos, even though she's not a Star Wars YouTuber, but I enjoy watching her reviews, although sometimes she can get into one of the other, camps. And then also, I sometimes watch the like Dan Murrell's Star Wars stuff, or the John Campea Star Wars stuff, or Christian Harloff, like some of them. That's kind of the groups. Yeah, Bull Run. I watched Star Wars Explained for a while, but he just got to the point where everything was positive and I just wasn't enjoying his stuff as much. I'm still subscribed to him, but haven't watched much recently. So, all right, everyone, we went for longer than I thought we would go. We went for an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Loved talking about books with all of you, to my students. It was cool to see some of you here. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.